everyone. Ooh, now you're getting so much ideas, you're getting so many inputs, and you're getting tired. So I was thinking a few years ago, by some strange coincidence, I left my career in business and went to dance for a while. So I was going around the Balkan region with different young dancers and doing crazy stuff, and by even more strange coincidence, I ended up performing a solo performance on stage in different festivals, but not really being trained as an artist. So every time before I had to go on the stage, I was quite nervous, and I was doing, all kinds of stuff. I was jumping, I was doing yoga, I was breathing, And there was another exercise that I like to do that I thought, why shouldn't we do it together, just to tune in before we start with the lecture. So can you all stand up, please? And, try to relax. And then breathe a few times, really deeply in and out. And the next time you will breathe in, you will also breathe out by shaking your head crazily and releasing a sound like this. Okay? Let's try to do it. Let's go. And the more crazy you go, the more you will really relax. So it's really cool. And the louder the voice, the bigger the effect. So let's go really crazy, okay? Yay! Once more, and now you go really to the maximum, okay? Okay, let's go. Cool, we are ready. Sit down. When I was asked to talk about innovative mindset, I said, shit, and if I'm supposed to talk about innovation, it should be done in an innovative way, right? So I was thinking, wow, it would be cool to go out and, let's say, lay down on the grass and have sun in our face, and then start to listen to some cool music, and then we'll, shortly stand up and start dancing and, do some sort of cool stuff. Or I was thinking, why shouldn't I make 18 minutes of good music, pull together my favorite songs and just play them for you in front of a, wide screen? Because you're getting so much information all the time, but we never really just, take time to relax and stare into a wide wall. Where I think cool stuff would happen, innovative mindset would happen. So I was, considering all these different options, and in the end I decided, no, what the heck? What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to talk about innovation in the most uninnovative way possible, and try to see if I can still keep my credibility. So I was thinking, what's the most uninnovative way? So at first, PowerPoint. I need to have a PowerPoint presentation, that's obvious. And second, I was thinking, I have to copy something, because, we usually talk about Chinese and how they're taking all the cool stuff and just copying it and selling it cheaply. So I was thinking, usually when I'm doing research at home, in my lunch break, I watch this cheesy Ellen DeGeneres show. And for some reason, I don't know, I like it, And one thing that Alice does is she plays music, and then she invites, people to dance with her. So that's what we're going to do now. So stand up, and I will, ask for some music as loud as possible. And pretend that I'm Ellen. her, and I love, she does this move, like, and immediately, in the same second, the music stops. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to try this out is because of this move. But it didn't work, so I have to practice with Sasa, who will be my DJ. Okay, so innovative mindset. Let's finally get to the point. So I think now this innovation is has become so boring because all everybody's talking about is innovation. So I think soon, employees at companies will start this thing that every time you say the word innovation, you have to pay 10 crowns, to go to the fika or drinks next time. So we're kind of sick of this innovation thing, but I think there's one reason why it's still fun. And this is that, of course, we still do innovation to grow, to stay competitive, to be more efficient, and so on and so forth. But what I think is cool is also that we do more and more innovation to solve social problems, to solve really important things in the society. And then also what I think is cool with innovation is that if we go back through the history of human civilization, we will see that essentially we've been innovative because we are curious. We want to create new things. We want to solve challenging problems. And we're having fun doing it. So I think having fun and being curious is still driving the innovation today. And I think this is really important. Then, of course, you think innovation. So what do we mean by innovation and how do we do it? And of course, we have two different ways. We talk a lot about incremental and radical innovation. And 2 days ago, we went to some inspirational trip to Skåne. And first we went to Tetra Pak, and we saw this clean, nicely organized manufacturing place. They showed us 100 maps, process maps of innovation, And in the end, they said, okay, now the top of our innovation is we will, take you to our customer lab or whatever it's called. And then they opened fancily these automatic doors, and suddenly you're surrounded by these thousands of different colors of Tetra Pak packages. And they're like, wow, that's the coolest stuff. But then you think, it's quite cool, it's quite impressive, but essentially they've been doing the same product since they started their company. Of course, the product has changed a little bit the color, a little bit the material, a little bit the shape, and so on. But essentially, we're talking about incremental innovation. We are talking about looking at what we are already doing and trying to do it faster, cheaper, better, whatever, right? And then, in the end of the trip, we went to... these high heels are not good for me. I think I should take them off. In the end of the trip, we went to this almost falling apart building, which had a skating park on the roof of the building. And we come there, and it's like, is this really an office? And then we go in, and there's a guy with crazy messy red hair around, and he says, I'm going to show you a little bit around here, I'm doing this, multimedia lab, and then I'm having this social factory here. We do also this Bambooser, you probably know the application that enables the live streaming that has millions and millions of users. And he's in his jeans, tatam, okay, I'll take you to the cellar. This is the most, cool place, we have. And we come down, and it's like a bunch of old bikes falling apart. So they're fixing bikes on one hand. Then on the other hand, they have this laser machine where you can just come and cut out stuff. And then they have a bunch of old machines where you can test something with media, whatever. And then some old sofas in the middle. And then a room where one girl collects crap from industry and tries to use it in schools to inspire kids. A bit of everything. But this, when you're there, you feel much more radical than when you are in Tetra Pak. And what is it really that makes it so different? What are we talking about here? What we're talking about is that if companies today most of them, or a lot of them, at least in Sweden, are quite good at being incremental, they're really struggling with being radical. Because to be radical, you need a different kind of mindset. To be a radical, you cannot be this kind of engineer with an analytical mindset, looking at these process maps and trying to make them even, shorter or better or faster or whatever. Doesn't work. So you have to be in a way more like a child who is able to imagine new things that don't exist yet, that no customer can tell you about, because they cannot imagine it either. So this is kind of hard, and in business we don't really know how to do it. So I was thinking, okay, we could look at this, fast-growing startups in Silicon Valley and look at how they do stuff and then, transfer it to business. But then I was thinking, if we talk about radical innovation, we cannot inspire business again from business. We have to go more radical. We have to look somewhere else. And I thought, if you think, who is the most radical or creative around us? For me, a natural choice would be artists. So I thought, why wouldn't we look at how artists are trying to create new stuff, and then take tools and principles and knowledge from them and try to use them in business to become more radical? Because in the end of the day, at least for the last 100 years, the core business of art is to be, radical, to be original, to come up in every performance you do with something new that, nobody else has done before. And also what I thought was really interesting, especially about performing arts, is that artists in performing arts really work with the whole body. They're really trying to use their mind, their emotions, the body, and it seems that there is something with the creativity and involving the body and emotions that is important. It's hard to be radical by only involving your mind, which we're so good at in business. So how can we, also work with other levels? So I thought, if this will work, nope. It's like killing Sasa. Maybe you can help me. Yeah. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do a PhD about that. I'll go out there and look at how artists work and interview them and try to develop some sort of method, adjusting their tools to business. So that's what I'm essentially trying to do. So what I wanted to share with you today, to really go to the core, is what I've come up with by talking to different artists and trying to understand how they're making things radically different. And how do they develop this kind of mindset, a special way of thinking, acting, and collaborating in groups that can support teams to be more radically innovative. So what I came up to is that there's a few different colors that you can see on this picture. And different colors represent different key qualities of this innovative mindset. In the center, in the core, in the green color, there's this idea of explorative mindset, of improvisational mindset, of creativity. And to do this is what you need. Usually, what I try to start with this lecture is that artists said, first, we have to tune in, because you cannot just come into a studio and do like that and be super creative. It doesn't work like that. People come with all sorts of problems, with all sorts of things on their mind. So first we have to tune in into our body, into the group. And they have a lot of tools how to do that. It could be anything from meditation to physical exercise to having a coffee together, whatever. It doesn't matter. It depends on what is the need in the process at that moment. Then, of course, what you also need to go really radical and take high risks together with others in the group, you need to build very high trust in the group. Because if you don't have the trust, people will not dare to take risks together. So this is a really important thing. And also, as I said before, to have this kind of open space or like blank space in your body so that you enable yourself to imagine things you have never imagined before. to have this really childlike quality of thinking and trying out new stuff. And they also talk about how you have to be present, how you have to be aware in the moment, because if you create ideas through improvisation, it means you're creating in the moment. And everyone who is there has to participate. And I think this is also quite interesting, because in business, when we talk about leadership, for example, we still think about the leader and the followers. We think about someone who is in charge, someone who is motivating, someone who is telling what to do, someone who is envisioning, and so on. But here, if you want to have this kind of improvisational, co-creative mindset, it means that people have to switch this role in the moment from leading to following, And leadership then is more some sort of a social process in the group, which shifts and rotates between people in the group. And then what I found also interesting with artists is that they really love the fact that they can come to the studio every day and have no clue whatsoever what's going to happen there. In business, we want to control, we want to plan, we want to know what's going to happen, but artists seem to enjoy this fact that they have no clue what's going to happen. And this helps them to go more radical, because if you want to be radical, it's hard to be in control all the time. So they really try to create this kind of flow, creative flow in the group, so that the ideas are jumping, flowing, building on each other in the group. And when you create this feeling, it's this wow moment. This is the moments when I remember when I went to dance, and I was never used to spend, 8 hours in the studio doing physical stuff. But sometimes when we were doing these things, and I totally forgot, where I was and who I was, and I was just flowing somewhere in that dance that we were doing, it felt so fantastic. And these are these flow moments that we really live for, the meaning that both Åsa talked about, that Simon talked about, Daniel talked about, and so on and so forth. So this, in a way, is in the center of, this innovative mindset. But this innovative mindset doesn't happen in one day. And this is also important. Dancers talk about practice, building mind practice. What does it mean? It's like a football team that goes and trains every day together. The more we train together, the better we will be in our innovative mindset. So you have to build the practice to become innovative, together in the group. It doesn't happen just like that. Then the other thing that you have to balance the creative action with is reflection. What I think is interesting is that artists all the time iterate between being in the state of improvising, creating ideas, and going with a distance and looking at ideas and reflecting upon them, and then going back and creating and going back and reflecting. And this is going on constantly. Maybe in one day you're switching these roles, several times. It's not like when you see these innovation charts in companies with a process which has first we have 1 month of generating ideas, and then we will select the ideas, and then we will finance the best ideas. No, this is an ongoing, iterating process, and it's not linear. It's quite messy, and it's not so planned. It's really improvised. And then the other important thing that also quite a few speakers talked about today is that for innovation to work, we need people to be engaged. It gets quite personal. And when you talk with artists, they usually don't even distinguish between themselves as private people and themselves as artists. This is something natural for them. They do their art because they have to, not because of the salary. Obviously, most of them cannot even survive on their salaries, or don't have a salary. They do it for free most of the time. So this kind of intrinsic motivation seems to be, from all research, extremely important. So how do you create this feeling of engagement and ownership in the group? This is an important question to support and develop this kind of innovative mindset. And then it becomes also important, who do you invite to work with? Right? So choreographers are extremely sensitive about who they work with, because that gets quite personal for them. And also, they work a lot with emotions, which is also one thing that we are not so good at in business. Right? We shouldn't show our emotions in business. This is not something we are allowed to do. But artists think the opposite. why don't we take emotions, grab them, and use them in a constructive way to create new ideas with them? So be aware of them, share them, and use them in a constructive way in the process. And they're quite good at doing that. And then also, they're aware that if you need this high trust and involvement in the group, you'll probably have to spend quite some time also socializing together, cooking together, drinking together, partying together, going to the cinema together, because when you are in this informal situation, these relationships and connections and trust will build, and also there will be no pressure to produce, so crazy stuff will happen that you can take back to the studio and develop them into innovative products. So we have improvisational or explorative, we have reflective, we have the personal. Then something that we are already very familiar with is the diversity. You know, we all know that in order to be radical, we need to think, how do we have diverse teams, and how do we make sure that our teams get inspired also from outside during the process. And last but not least is this idea that what kind of structures do we need to support this kind of mindset? And the way artists use time, physical space, and process is quite different. It's very organic, it's very emergent, it's really following the needs of the moment. So when they come to the studio, maybe they have an idea how they're going to work through the day, but maybe when they come into the studio, they find out everyone is exhausted. So first what we need to do is we need to spend 2 hours drinking coffee together and, you know, tuning in and sharing all the problems we have so we can move into the physical practice or whatever it is. But this means that time becomes not so linear in this business, that space has to be used in very different ways to support a process, which means we might be moving around because we need different kind of space in different parts of the process. If we're all the time in the same studio, in the same office, we're going to get stuck. This is not going to work. And also process has to be really designed according to what people need and feel in the moment. So now I have to stop. I get too involved. You see, I like too much what I do. So if you're interested to hear more about this, me and my colleague Yen will actually start a course about this in September. So you can contact me and you know, join us in the course and then really learn more and do it in a more fun way, you know, through creative workshops, because I don't really believe in lectures, you know, still doing it but not really believing in it. So thanks for your attention.